My girlfriend's parents forged guardianship papers right after my parents' funeral so they could make me sleep in their dead son's room and wear his altered clothes. When I asked the dad why he was doing this to me, he smiled and said, "Because we love you. Because you're family now." I stayed silent. That was 8 months ago. Yesterday, he was crying in court as they read the charges. When my parents died in a head-on collision 3 weeks before graduation, I thought my life was over. Then my girlfriend Christine's family swooped in like guardian angels. "You're practically family already," her mom Tanya said. "Stay in our guest house as long as you need." Her dad Roger said, "Gregory would have wanted us to help you." Gregory was their son who died 2 years earlier in what they called a hiking accident. I'd never met him, but his presence lingered everywhere. Trophies lining the mantle, his Harvard acceptance letter framed in the hallway, his bedroom preserved like a shrine. The family's generosity felt overwhelming but genuine. They paid my senior year tuition without blinking, bought me a car, and even hired me a grief counselor. But slowly, things started feeling off. Tanya began buying me clothes, expensive brands I'd never heard of. When I tried them on, Roger would get this strange look in his eyes, like he was seeing a ghost. They started insisting I eat dinner with them. Christine thought it was sweet how much her parents had taken to me. "They never connected with any of my other boyfriends," she said. When they suggested I move into Gregory's old room, Christine practically squealed. "They really see you as family now." I felt grateful, even if sleeping in a dead boy's bed felt creepy. His clothes still hung in the closet, his textbooks still sat on the desk. The breaking point came senior year when college acceptances started rolling in. I'd gotten into state with Christine, full scholarship. We'd planned everything, dorm room assignments, class schedules, even picked out matching university hoodies. But when I told Roger and Tanya at dinner, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "State?" Tanya laughed, but it sounded forced. "Honey, we've already submitted your application to Harvard, Gregory's alma mater." Roger cleared his throat. "We took the liberty. Your grades are exceptional. They practically guaranteed acceptance." I looked at Christine for support, but she was nodding along. "Babe, it's Harvard. This is incredible." When I started to protest, Tanya interrupted. "We've also enrolled you in rowing." Gregory was captain of the team. That night, I tried to reason with Christine. She was lying on Gregory's old bed, my bed now, flipping through a Harvard brochure. "You're being ungrateful," she said without looking up. "My parents are handing you opportunities most people would cull for." When I pointed out that they'd made these decisions without asking me, she finally met my eyes. Sometimes people who love you know what's best for you better than you do. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox to clear my head. It was empty. Weird, because I was expecting my state acceptance packet. When I asked Roger about it, he got that same strange look. "Oh, I've been collecting your mail. Didn't want you to be overwhelmed with junk while grieving." He handed me a single envelope from Harvard. "This came today. I think you'll be pleased." Something was wrong. Really wrong. I waited until the family left for Tanya's charity lunch, then searched Roger's study. In his desk drawer, I found a stack of opened mail addressed to me. State acceptance letter, financial aid packages from 3 other schools, scholarship notifications, all dated weeks ago. But that wasn't the worst part. Underneath the mail was a legal document with my signature, except I'd never seen it before. Guardianship papers, dated right after my parents' funeral. In the confusion and grief, I'd apparently signed away my legal independence to Roger and Tanya. I was 18, but somehow they were now my legal guardians. My hands shaking, I grabbed the papers and ran to Christine. I needed answers. I needed someone on my side. When I found her, I told her I needed answers as to why her parents seemed to be taking over my life. She looked at me and burst into tears. She said, "Gregory didn't die in a hiking accident. He tried to leave for college in California instead of Harvard. Said he couldn't breathe in this house anymore. So they had him committed. Said he was having a mental breakdown from academic pressure." She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a hidden folder. Screenshots of messages from an unknown number. "He's been writing me from the facility for 2 years. They won't let him out unless he agrees to come home and follow their plan, but he won't break." She looked up at me with hollow eyes. "They're never going to let you go either. Just like they never let me go when I tried to help him leave." I stared at the phone screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The messages from Gregory were dated just last week. He was alive, trapped, but alive. Christine's hands trembled as she scrolled through more screenshots. The front door slammed downstairs. Roger's voice echoed up the stairwell, calling out that he'd forgotten his presentation materials. Christine's face went white. She shoved the phone behind Gregory's old calculus textbook on the shelf, then grabbed my arm and pulled me toward her homework spread across the desk. Roger appeared in the doorway moments later, his eyes scanning the room before settling on us. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Working on college prep together? That's wonderful." His gaze lingered on me for a hit too long. "Dinner's at 6. Your favorite tonight. Tanya's making her famous lasagna." After he left, Christine and I sat in silence until we heard his car pull away. She reached for the phone again, but I stopped her. We needed to be more careful. Roger had come back for a reason, and it wasn't presentation materials. That evening, I pushed food around my plate while Roger discussed Harvard's orientation schedule. Each bite felt like swallowing sand. Tanya had made chicken parmesan, Gregory's favorite, according to a photo I'd seen in his room. She never mentioned it. "The welcome packet arrived today," Roger announced, producing a thick envelope. I took the liberty of reviewing it. "Quite comprehensive. They'll want your housing preferences by next week." The words bubbled up before I could stop them. "Why do you care so much about my future?" The table went silent. Christine's foot connected with my shin under the table. Hard. Roger set down his fork deliberately. "Because we love you. Because you're family now. Because we want what's best for you." Before anyone could respond, the front door burst open. Christine's younger sister Katie ran in, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, Benji stole my phone at lunch and won't give it back." The next 20 minutes dissolved into chaos. Tanya rushed to comfort Katie while trying to call the school. Roger paced the kitchen, leaving voicemails for Benji's parents. In the commotion, I noticed Tanya unconsciously straightening a piece of paper on the counter, Gregory's Harvard acceptance letter, still displayed after 2 years. I knelt beside Katie, offering her tissues. "Hey, we can track your phone. Want me to show you how?" She nodded, hiccuping through her tears. While I helped her log in to find my phone on Tanya's tablet, Roger drifted closer. He watched over my shoulder as I explained the tracking features. "That's very practical thinking," he said quietly. Gregory was always good with technology too, very methodical. Christine appeared at my elbow. Roger turned to her with that same calculating look. "You two seemed deep in conversation earlier. Everything all right?" right? Christine's response came automatically. Just helping with essay revisions. The Harvard application is pretty intense. Of course. Roger's hand landed on my shoulder. We're all just worried about helping you adjust. Losing your parents. It's natural to feel overwhelmed. We want to make sure you're coping properly. The tablet showed Katie's phone at a classmate's house 3 blocks away. As Roger called the parents, I caught Christine's eye. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd been playing this game far too long. Later, while Tanya drove Katie to retrieve her phone, I sat with Christine and Katie's younger sister in the living room. Katie had finally stopped crying, but she kept glancing at her mother's taillights through the window. Mom's been so stressed, Katie said suddenly. She told Aunt Catherine she's terrified of losing another child. Christine stiffened beside me. Katie, Mom didn't mean. She did too. She was crying really hard. Said she couldn't go through it again. Katie pulled her knees to her chest. Is that why she watches you guys all the time? My phone buzzed. The grief counselor's office. Rescheduling tomorrow's appointment to next week. I stared at the message, wondering if Roger had something to do with the change. When Tanya returned with Katie's phone, she looked frazzled. Her hands shook as she poured herself tea. I'm sorry about dinner. I have that quarterly report due tomorrow and I completely forgot. I might have to pull an all-nighter. I can help, Roger offered, but Tanya waved him off. No, it's my mess. I can't think straight lately. Her voice cracked. Everything feels so fragile. The next hour blurred together. Tanya's work crisis escalated when her laptop crashed. Neighbors arrived with soup after hearing about her breakdown from Katie's friend's mother. Roger fielded phone calls while trying to recover Tanya's files. In the chaos, nobody noticed when Christine's phone lit up with a notification. She grabbed it quickly, but I saw the preview. A new message from the contact labeled G. Christine's thumb moved to dismiss it, but Roger's voice cut through the room. Christine, whose message was that? Just Sarah. About debate practice. The lie came too easily. I helped serve soup to the neighbors while Roger worked on Tanya's laptop. One of them, Mrs. Chen, patted my hand sympathetically. You poor dear. Such a difficult adjustment. At least you have such caring guardians. After they left, I found myself actually wanting to help Tanya. Despite everything, her panic was real. Her fear was real. Maybe that's what made this so twisted. Somewhere in their need to control, there was genuine emotion. I offered to proofread her report while Roger continued recovering files. She looked at me with such gratitude that for a moment, I almost forgot about the stolen mail in Roger's desk. You're so helpful, she said. Just like she caught herself, but we both knew how that sentence ended. While I worked on Tanya's report, Roger and Christine murmured in the kitchen. I caught fragments. Private conversation. Concerning behavior. Adjustment period. Christine's responses sounded rehearsed, like she'd learned exactly what to say to deflect suspicion. My phone buzzed again. A group text from high school friends, planning a graduation party. Someone mentioned how lucky I was to have such amazing guardians who'd stepped up after my loss. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could I say? That they'd stolen my mail? That they'd trapped me with forged documents? I'd sound ungrateful. Unstable. Exactly what Roger wanted people to think. I helped Tanya until nearly midnight. Roger had successfully recovered most of her files, and she cried with relief. Real tears. Real gratitude. It made my skin crawl, knowing that this woman who could sob over a work deadline had also helped forge my guardianship papers. As I headed to bed, to Gregory's bed, Roger stopped me in the hallway. Thank you for helping with Katie earlier. And Tanya. Family supports each other. Right, family. His eyes narrowed slightly. The grief counselor called. Said you've been discussing some concerning topics. Feeling trapped. Paranoid. These are normal grief responses, but we want to make sure you're getting proper help. My blood ran cold. Roger practically waving college brochures in your face while you're trying to eat your mashed potatoes, and then poor Katie bursts in crying about her stolen phone like she's in a teen drama. Talk about timing. I love how Roger's watching this kid track the phone like he's taking notes for his next creepy move. And meanwhile, Christine's getting texts from someone mysteriously labeled G, which she swears is just Sarah, about debate practice. Patient confidentiality meant nothing when your therapist reported to your legal guardians. I'm fine. Of course you are. We're here to make sure you stay that way. He paused at his bedroom door. Oh, and I noticed you were in my study earlier. Looking for something specific? I forced my expression to remain neutral. Just wanted to check if my state packet had arrived. Force of habit. Ah, well, Harvard will send everything directly to me as your guardian. Less for you to worry about. His smile was razor sharp. Sleep well. Tomorrow we'll discuss the rowing team tryout schedule. In my room, Gregory's room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The same ceiling he'd stared at for 18 years. His old textbooks loomed on the shelf, hiding Christine's phone with its messages from a brother everyone thought was dead. Somewhere, Gregory was fighting to maintain his sanity in whatever facility they'd locked him in, just like I was fighting to maintain mine in this house. I thought about my parents. 3 weeks felt like a lifetime ago. They'd worried about Roger and Tanya's influence, I realize now. Those last few dinners, the way Mom would change the subject when I mentioned Christine's family, the way Dad suggested I consider colleges out of state, away from their reach. Had they sensed something I'd been too blind to see? My phone showed 17 missed calls to my old house over the past week. Roger was right. It did look obsessive, unstable. Everything I did could be twisted into evidence of grief-induced breakdown. Just like Gregory's desire for independence had been twisted into mental illness, requiring institutionalization. The Harvard welcome packet sat on my desk, mocking me. Every form Roger filled out, every decision he made for my benefit, tightened the trap. Christine was right. They were never going to let me go. But unlike Gregory, I knew what I was fighting. I knew their game. I pulled out a notebook and began writing. If Roger wanted to document my behavior, I'd document his. Every controlling action, every forged signature, every piece of stolen mail. The war had begun, and I refused to end up in a facility, writing desperate messages to Christine from behind locked doors. Tomorrow, Roger would push harder. Tanya would buy more of Gregory's favorite clothes in my size. Christine would continue her performance of the supportive girlfriend while hiding her brother's proof of life. And I would smile and nod and plan, because now I understood the game. They thought grief made me weak. They were wrong. Grief made me dangerous, because I had nothing left to lose except my freedom, and I'd die before I let them take that too. The morning brought Tanya's volunteer schedule announcement at breakfast. She'd signed up to help at my old elementary school, the same one where Mrs. Peterson had taught me 3rd grade. Roger nodded approvingly as she explained her new commitment to childhood education. My stomach stomach churned watching her butter toast with the same hands that had forged my signature. Christine reported to her parents that I'd seemed upset about the Harvard opportunity during our study session. I countered by mentioning Christine had appeared frightened to speak freely. Both observations held truth from different angles, creating a perfect stalemate of credibility. The mandatory family therapy session arrived faster than expected. Dr. Whitman's office smelled like vanilla candles and false comfort. Roger brought up my old complaints about my parents' protective nature, how I'd called them overbearing when they'd questioned my relationship with Christine. The court-appointed counselor scribbled notes while I sat frozen, watching my own words transform into evidence of instability. Katie's innocent repetition of her mother's explanation hit harder than any accusation. She'd overheard Tanya telling someone I was too sad to make good choices about college. The child's genuine confusion about why I seemed upset by their help made my chest tighten. Even the youngest member of this family had been recruited into the narrative. The doorbell camera footage Roger presented showed me pacing outside for 20 minutes before entering the house each day. He'd compiled a montage demonstrating my reluctance to accept their support. Every hesitation, every moment of dread, documented and weaponized. My request to review the guardianship papers triggered an emergency family court hearing. The judge, overwhelmed with custody battles and divorce proceedings, barely glanced at my petition before dismissing it as adolescent rebellion exacerbated by grief. Roger's lawyer had prepared extensively. Mine was running late from another case. That evening, I discovered Roger had changed the Netflix password, but muscle memory helped me guess the new one: Gregory's birthday. The viewing history revealed his final weeks of freedom spent watching prison break documentaries and survival shows. Each title told the story of his growing desperation. Roger's LinkedIn posts painted a different picture: years of involvement with troubled teens, glowing recommendations from grateful families. Reading between the lines revealed a pattern: vulnerable young people who'd lost their way, guided back to prestigious paths by his firm hand. Gregory had been his first project, his first failure. The grief counselor's next call came while Roger sat across from me at dinner. She needed to discuss some concerning statements I'd made about feeling trapped. Roger's expression remained neutral as she spoke through the speakerphone, but his fingers drummed against the table in satisfaction. My attempt to record our next conversation failed spectacularly. Nervous fingers hit the stop button instead of record, and the red icon remained visible on my phone screen. Roger noticed immediately, his calm inquiry about why I'd need to record our discussion sending ice through my veins. So now Roger's playing tech support and changed the Netflix password to Gregory's birthday. Talk about leaving breadcrumbs for someone who's supposed to be gone. Love how this guy has a whole LinkedIn page bragging about helping troubled teens, while his actual son is watching prison break shows like he's planning his own escape route. Nothing suspicious there at all, Roger. Harvard's orientation deadline loomed like a guillotine. Accept and remain under guardianship through college. Decline and lose the opportunity forever. Roger reminded me daily of the generous gift they'd arranged, how ungrateful it would appear to waste such privilege. Mrs. de Peterson chose job security when the anonymous complaint arrived at her school. Someone had reported an inappropriate interest in a student's family situation. She couldn't risk her tenure, not with retirement so close. Her apologetic look across the parking lot said everything her silence couldn't. Tanya's laundry habits revealed new depths of manipulation. Gregory's clothes appeared in my dresser, altered to my size, washed in the same detergent he'd used. I found myself wearing his favorite sweater to school without realizing it until catching my reflection in a window. Roger's offer came wrapped in false generosity, a proper goodbye visit to my parents' grave in exchange for accepting the family's guidance on college. The trade felt like selling my soul, but the cemetery remained off limits without guardian permission. My refusal was immediately reframed as rejecting healthy grief processing. The school guidance counselor slipped me a business card during a routine check-in. Legal aid, specializing in family law. Her whispered explanation revealed she'd overheard concerning conversations between Roger and Tanya in the main office. The guardianship couldn't be immediately revoked at 18, but fraudulent obtainment changed everything. Retrieving Christine's hidden phone required careful timing. My fingers brushed against something unexpected, a leather journal wedged between the bookshelf and wall. Gregory's handwriting filled pages with observations, evidence, documentation of his parents' controlling behavior. He'd been building a case before they'd committed him. The journal revealed Gregory's attempts to help Roger with legitimate business problems, showing genuine care before his parents' betrayal. Every entry demonstrated the slow realization that love and control had become inseparable in his parents' minds. Christine's grandparents faced an impossible choice when I approached them for support. Speaking out meant losing access to their grandchildren. Their decision to remain neutral preserved family relationships, but eliminated another potential refuge. The pain in their eyes suggested they knew exactly what was happening, but felt powerless to intervene. I began adopting Tanya's own techniques, documenting Roger's behavior around other teenagers with concerned observation, his interactions at school events, his lingering interest in troubled students, his offers of mentorship to vulnerable kids, all carefully noted in my own journal. Research revealed Gregory's former therapist now worked part-time at a coffee shop downtown. Ordering a latte while making small talk about the weather, I learned about psychiatric holds, involuntary commitments, the legal mechanisms that had trapped Gregory for 2 years. She couldn't discuss specific patients, but her general explanations painted a clear picture. Gregory's email password appeared in his journal, a combination of his rowing team number and the date he'd tried to leave. The library computer provided anonymous access to years of correspondence, evidence Roger didn't know existed, messages to lawyers, attempts to secure help, documentation of his parents' escalating control. My estranged uncle emerged from wherever he'd been hiding since the funeral, suddenly interested in contesting my parents' will. His custody claim had nothing to do with concern and everything to do with inheritance. Fighting both Roger and my uncle meant missing Harvard's response deadline entirely. The system marked my silence as declined by non-response. Legal fees drained my college fund, while Roger accessed the accounts as my guardian, citing family emergency. The confrontation at my parents' favorite restaurant traumatized the waitress who'd known our family for years. She'd served my last birthday dinner there, and now watched me accuse my guardians of theft and fraud. My part-time job evaporated fired when the manager cited excessive personal drama affecting workplace reliability. The replacement hire turned out to be Tanya's neighbor's daughter, a detail that felt less like coincidence and more like calculated removal of my independence. Roger changed the locks on Gregory's room, my room, for safety concerns. I found myself sleeping in Katie's room, surrounded by unicorn posters and reminders of the innocence being corrupted by this family's dysfunction. My grandmother's tearful phone call begged me to stop tearing the family apart. Her words about making Gregory's situation worse with all this attention cut deep. She didn't understand that silence had enabled 2 years of his imprisonment. Christine's debate championship dreams crumbled when my investigation triggered questions about Roger's recommendation letter. Her tears were genuine disappointment, not manipulation, as she watched her academic future dissolve. Her coach's husband threatened divorce if she got dragged into custody battles. The impossible choice crystallized: continue pursuing truth while destroying innocent futures, or surrender to preserve what remained. Christine's moment of doubt, wondering if her parents truly believed they were helping, mirrored my own uncertainty. The line between delusion and deliberate harm had blurred beyond recognition. Public admission of my past, lies about my parents' drinking habits, sacrificed credibility for honesty. I'd protected their image while alive, claiming they were perfect when they'd struggled like anyone else. Now that admission became evidence of a pattern of deception, even as I insisted this time was different. The revelation from my parents' former neighbor hit like a physical blow. They'd sought lawyer recommendations for a family protection matter weeks before their death. The accident's timing felt less like tragedy and more like terrible convenience. Roger's emergency motion claimed I posed danger to family stability. The court date acceleration meant my legal aid lawyer would be in trial, leaving me with whoever the office could spare. Roger's team had prepared for months. Mine had days. His genuine belief in saving me from Gregory's mistakes made everything worse. Years of working with troubled teens had convinced him that firm guidance prevented tragedy. His tears at my parents' grave were real, even as his methods destroyed lives. Christine's guilt about failing to save Gregory became my weapon. I manipulated her emotions, extracting facility information through calculated cruelty. The honest version of myself who'd never lied to Christine died in that moment, replaced by someone willing to exploit trauma for truth. Katie's art therapy drawings arrived unexpectedly during a babysitting session. Her innocent sketches of a missing brother revealed more than any confrontation could. Gregory's absence haunted even those too young to understand why. The minor legal victory establishing guardianship fraud felt hollow against Roger's genuine tears. We stood at my parents' grave for different reasons. Him mourning another lost child, me grieving the parents who'd tried to protect me from this moment. Roger's comparison between my behavior and Gregory's breakdown gained traction with the family court evaluator. The pattern seemed identical to outside observers. A traumatized teen rejecting loving support. Only I knew the support itself was the trauma. Everything hinged on Gregory's testimony from the facility. Would he risk extended commitment to speak truth, or had 2 years broken his will to fight? The video link scheduled for next week would determine both our futures. Katie's innocent question about why I wanted to hurt her parents cut deeper than any professional evaluation. My past kindness to her became leverage, her confusion genuine as she struggled to understand adult deceptions. High school teachers chose sides based on job security and administrative pressure. Those with tenure offered quiet support. Newer hires maintained careful distance. The building itself became a battlefield of loyalties and calculated risks. Family courts designed for parental disputes, not guardianship fraud, created procedural nightmares. Legal mechanisms assumed good faith that didn't exist here. Proving coercion didn't automatically void guardianship, a lesson learned through expensive defeats. The paralegal from my parents' old firm reviewed files after hours, risking her job for truth. Her discovery of documentation my parents had gathered confirmed their fears. They'd known something was wrong, but stayed in contact to protect me, gathering evidence until the accident stole their chance to act. The emergency key to their home safe had seemed like paranoid preparation when they'd given it to me. Now it revealed meticulous documentation of Roger's behavior, Tanya's manipulations, their growing concern about my relationship with Christine. They'd seen what I'd been too in love to notice. Their final week spent in fear but unwilling to abandon me to face Roger alone spoke to parental love I'd never fully appreciated. They died protecting me, and honoring them meant finishing what they'd started regardless of personal cost. Using their evidence meant destroying any illusion of normal family life. But normal had died with them in that collision, leaving only the choice between comfortable lies and destructive truth. Roger's overconfidence led to contradictory sworn statements about guardianship discussions. His timeline shifted with each telling, revealing cracks in the carefully constructed narrative. Notarized documents contradicted earlier testimony, providing the leverage needed for serious legal challenge. I presented my parents' evidence without vindictiveness, maintaining the dignity they'd have wanted. Roger's realization of the scope of their documentation played across his face. They'd been building a case for months before their death. Legal momentum shifted as patterns of deception became undeniable. The court couldn't ignore evidence authenticated by handwriting experts, backed by witness testimony. The timeline proved premeditation to gain control, not spontaneous generosity after tragedy. Both sides prepared for the hearing where Gregory would testify remotely. 2 years of silence would break one way or another, determining whether Roger's control extended beyond physical walls. The approaching courtroom battle would force everyone to choose sides publicly. Family divisions that had festered in private would be exposed under fluorescent lights and legal scrutiny. Some relationships would survive truth, others would shatter beyond repair. The paralegal's guidance proved invaluable as I organized my parents' evidence into chronological order. Each document revealed another piece of their growing concern. Emails to lawyers, notes from meetings they'd attended without telling me, even recordings of phone conversations with Roger, where his controlling nature leaked through his polite facade. The emergency key opened more than just their safe. Inside, I found bank statements showing regular withdrawals they'd hidden from me, money set aside for legal fees they'd never gotten to use. A business card for a family law specialist had appointment times penciled on the back, all after their death date. Roger's contradictory statements multiplied as his lawyer scrambled to address the mounting evidence. During depositions, he claimed the guardianship discussion happened spontaneously after the funeral, then later insisted my parents had agreed to it weeks before. Yeah, so Roger's lawyer must be getting paid overtime, trying to keep track of which version of the story they're supposed to be telling today. The notarized document he produced was dated 3 days before the accident. Impossible if his timeline held true. I presented each piece of evidence methodically, maintaining the composure my parents would have wanted. Roger's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear as he realized the scope of their documentation. They'd been building this case for months, preparing to protect me from exactly this scenario. The judge ordered an immediate review of all guardianship documents. Handwriting experts confirmed what I already knew. My signature on the original papers showed signs of tracing, the pressure points inconsistent with natural writing. The witness who'd supposedly verified my identity turned out to be one of Roger's business associates who'd never actually met me. Legal momentum shifted dramatically. The court couldn't ignore authenticated evidence backed by expert testimony. The timeline proved Roger and Tanya had been planning this before my parents died, transforming their supposed generosity into calculated predation. Both sides prepared frantically for Gregory's testimony. Roger's lawyer filed motion after motion trying to block it, claiming Gregory's mental state made him an unreliable witness. The facility administrator resisted the subpoena until threatened with contempt charges. The courtroom filled with every person whose life had been touched by this case. Christine sat in the middle section, not committing to either side. Her grandparents took seats behind me, their earlier neutrality abandoned. Teachers, neighbors, even the waitress from my parents' restaurant came to bear witness. Roger's nervous tics became more pronounced as we waited for the video link to connect. His fingers drummed against the table, the same rhythm I'd noticed during family dinners when he felt control slipping. Tanya sat rigid beside him, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. The screen flickered to life, revealing Gregory for the first time in 2 years. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes held a clarity that contradicted any claims of mental illness. The facility administrator sat beside him, clearly uncomfortable with the proceedings. Gregory's testimony came in measured tones, each word chosen carefully. He detailed his parents' escalating control, their reaction when he'd chosen California over Harvard, the way they'd twisted his desire for independence into symptoms of breakdown. He produced his own documentation, journal entries, recorded conversations, proof of his mental competence that the facility had tried to suppress. The administrator squirmed as Gregory revealed the facility's financial connections to Roger's business. Monthly payments far exceeding standard care costs, bonuses tied to keeping Gregory committed, even a promised donation for a new wing contingent on his continued residence. The judge's expression darkened with each revelation. Roger's breakdown started small, a tremor in his hands, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool courtroom. When Gregory described the specific manipulation tactics his parents used, Roger's carefully maintained composure cracked. He began speaking out of turn, insisting he'd only wanted to help, that Gregory needed structure, that I was making the same mistakes. The judge's gavel silenced him, but the damage was done. Roger's outburst revealed the depth of his delusion, his genuine belief that controlling others constituted love. Years of working with troubled teens had convinced him that firm guidance justified any means, that freedom of choice was a luxury traumatized youth couldn't afford. Tanya's tears seemed genuine as she watched her son testify against her. Her whispered attempts to justify their actions to her lawyer painted a picture of a woman who'd lost one child to what she saw as bad decisions and refused to lose another, even if it meant imprisoning them. The judge ordered a recess to review the evidence. In the hallway, Christine approached me for the first time since the proceedings began. Her apology came through actions rather than words. She handed me a flash drive containing every message from Gregory she'd hidden, every piece of evidence she'd been too frightened to share before. Katie clung to her grandmother's hand, confusion evident as she tried to understand why her brother was on a screen instead of home. Her innocent questions about when Gregory could visit cut through the legal complexity to the human cost of her parents' actions. When court reconvened, the judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The guardianship was voided immediately. All documents related to it declared fraudulent. Roger faced criminal charges for forgery and fraud. The facility administrator would be investigated for accepting bribes and unlawful detention, but the judge went further. Recognizing the pattern of behavior, she ordered psychiatric evaluations for both Roger and Tanya. Gregory would be released immediately with a treatment plan for readjusting to life outside the facility. I would receive an independent guardian ad litem until age 21, someone to help navigate the legal and financial aftermath without controlling my choices. Roger's final breakdown came as court officers prepared to take him into custody. His desperate insistence that he'd save dozens of troubled teens, that his methods worked, that Gregory and I were ungrateful for his help, revealed the depth of his delusion. Even facing criminal charges, he couldn't accept that love without freedom was just another form of prison. Tanya chose a different path. Faced with losing her remaining children if she didn't cooperate, she agreed to intensive therapy and supervised visitation. Her recognition that her fear of loss had driven her to destroy what she'd tried to protect offered a glimmer of hope for eventual healing. The community divided predictably. Some had suspected something was wrong, but chosen comfortable silence over difficult truth. Others expressed shock, unable to reconcile the generous family they thought they knew with the reality exposed in court. A few admitted they'd seen signs but felt powerless to intervene without proof. Christine's grandmother pulled me aside after the ruling. Her quiet admission that she'd been documenting concerns about Roger for years but hadn't known how to act on them reflected a common theme. Many had seen pieces of the truth but lacked the complete picture or courage to act. The financial aftermath proved complex. My parents' estate, tied up in legal battles, would take months to fully resolve. The college fund Roger had drained required forensic accounting to trace. Harvard's admission, tainted by fraud, had to be formally withdrawn. State scholarship, lost to missed deadlines, couldn't be reinstated until the next academic year. Gregory's release required careful planning. 2 years of institutionalization had left marks that freedom alone couldn't erase. The treatment team developed a gradual reintegration plan, supervised housing at first, then increasing independence as he readjusted to making his own choices. Our first meeting outside the facility was awkward. Two strangers bound by shared trauma. His gratitude for my role in exposing the truth came through gestures rather than words. He'd followed the case from inside, knowing his testimony would be crucial, but unsure anyone would fight hard enough to demand it. Christine faced her own reckoning. Her parents' actions had tainted every achievement, every recommendation letter, every opportunity they'd arranged. Some bridges burned beyond repair. Her debate coach couldn't continue their association. Her college applications needed complete revision without Roger's connections. But she also found unexpected support. Friends who'd distanced themselves during the legal proceedings returned, recognizing she'd been trapped in her own way. Her decision to defer college for a year to focus on therapy and rebuilding her life independent of her parents' influence showed growth born from hard truth. Katie's adjustment proved most challenging. Too young to fully understand but old enough to feel the family's fracture, she struggled with divided loyalties. The court appointed a child advocate to help her navigate relationships with parents whose love had become toxic, siblings recovering from trauma, and grandparents trying to provide stability. The legal protections established in our case created precedent for similar situations. While not the sweeping reform that makes headlines, it offered future victims of guardianship fraud clearer paths to justice. The facility's practices faced scrutiny that would protect others from Gregory's fate. I spent my parents' birthday at their grave, finally able to visit without Roger's permission or presence. The flowers I brought were ones they'd actually liked, not the expensive arrangements Roger had insisted on. Their sacrifice in gathering evidence, their determination to protect me even as danger closed in, had ultimately saved both Gregory and me from longer imprisonment. The guardian ad litem helped me navigate practical matters without controlling my choices. College applications for the spring semester, trauma therapy that actually maintained confidentiality, financial planning that respected my autonomy, each step toward independence honored what my parents had wanted for me. Roger's sentencing balanced justice with recognition of his genuine mental health issues. Prison time for the fraud, but with mandatory psychiatric treatment. The judge's hope that understanding his compulsion to control might prevent future victims seemed optimistic, but necessary for any chance at rehabilitation. Gregory chose California after all, the college that had triggered his parents' breakdown 2 years ago. His acceptance of their original offer, contingent on explaining his absence, required courage I wasn't sure I'd have possessed, but he'd fought for this freedom too long to let fear keep him from claiming it. The house felt different without Roger's oppressive presence. Tanya, under supervision, began the slow work of learning to love without controlling. Her therapy reports, shared with the court, revealed a woman grappling with how fear had twisted her maternal instincts into something harmful. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged. The trust between Christine and me, shattered by necessity during the legal proceedings, would never fully rebuild. We'd both done what survival required, but the cost was a connection that couldn't withstand that kind of calculated manipulation. Others emerged stronger. Mrs. Peterson, freed from the threat to her career, became an advocate for students in similar situations. The guidance counselor who'd risked her job to slip me that business card established protocols for identifying and helping trapped youth. 6 months after the verdict, I stood in my own apartment, boxes of my parents' things finally retrieved from storage. Each item held memories untainted by Roger's influence. Photos from family vacations he'd never controlled. Letters between my parents that revealed their strength. Evidence of a life that had been real and mine. The independence felt fragile some days. Trauma didn't vanish with legal victory. Hypervigilance around authority figures, difficulty trusting offers of help, the instinct to document every interaction. These shadows would take years to fade, but they were my shadows to face, my choices to make. Gregory and I maintained contact through careful messages, both still learning to communicate without surveillance. His progress reports from California revealed someone slowly reclaiming the life stolen from him. Not the Harvard path his parents had demanded, but his own journey toward healing. Oh man, so Christine's grandma was basically sitting on a folder full of Roger's greatest red flags for years, but didn't know what to do with it. She literally had the answer key to a test, but was too nervous to use it. OP also finally got to bring their parents the flowers they actually liked instead of Roger's fancy ones, which is such a small but sweet victory after everything that happened. I enrolled at State for spring semester, my original choice finally possible, without Christine beside me as planned, without the innocence that had made matching hoodies seem important, but with something harder earned, the knowledge that freedom was worth any battle, that love without choice was just control wearing a kinder mask. The Reddit post about my experience helped others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. Not viral fame or national attention, just quiet messages from people who'd seen their own controlling relationships reflected in my story. Each person who found courage to seek help felt like honoring my parents' memory. Tanya's supervised visits with Katie showed slow progress, learning to ask rather than tell, to suggest rather than demand, to accept no without viewing it as rejection. Whether she'd ever fully overcome her compulsion to control remained uncertain, but the effort was real. Roger's letters from prison went unanswered. His continued insistence that he'd acted from love, that structure and control were gifts he'd offered ungrateful children, showed how far he had to go. Some delusions ran too deep for easy healing. The anniversary of my parents' death arrived with bittersweet relief. This time, I could mourn them properly, not as the perfect parents Roger had tried to invoke for manipulation, but as the flawed, loving people who died trying to protect me. Their preparation had saved me when I couldn't save myself. Christine found her own path forward, accepting a gap-year position teaching debate at an inner-city school. Without her father's connections, but with hard-won understanding of how power could corrupt even loving relationships, her choice to work with vulnerable youth, knowing the signs to watch for, felt like her own form of penance. Gregory's first visit back took place at our parents' grave. We stood together, two survivors of different battles in the same war, honoring the people who'd seen danger we'd been too trusting to recognize. His quiet thanks to them for documenting the truth echoed my own gratitude. The legal precedent from our case helped 3 other families that year. Not headline-worthy numbers, but 3 young people freed from fraudulent guardianship championships, 3 futures reclaimed from would-be saviors who couldn't distinguish love from control. Each victory felt like my parents' legacy extending beyond their own child. I chose psychology as my major, driven by need to understand how love became manipulation, how genuine mental illness differed from manufactured symptoms, how families could heal from the specific trauma of betrayal disguised as care. The irony of studying what had nearly destroyed me wasn't lost on anyone. Spring arrived with tentative hope. Gregory thriving in California, Christine rebuilding her life with honest effort, Katie learning to navigate complex relationships with professional help, even Tanya showing genuine progress in therapy, slowly accepting that her children needed freedom more than protection. Only Roger remained unchanged, his prison letters revealing someone still convinced he'd been right. His inability to recognize the harm he'd caused meant he'd likely never be safe around vulnerable youth again. Sometimes the greatest tragedy was someone too broken to realize they needed healing. My apartment became a sanctuary of chosen solitude. No monitoring, no documentation required, no permissions needed. The freedom to make mistakes, to choose poorly, to learn from consequences. Everything Roger had tried to steal in the name of protection. The guardian ad litem's role gradually decreased as I proved capable of managing my own affairs. Each milestone, signing my own lease, managing finances, making medical decisions, felt like reclaiming pieces of autonomy Roger had tried to steal forever. On what would have been my parents' anniversary, I visited their favorite restaurant. The waitress who'd witnessed my confrontation with Roger smiled sadly as she served their usual order. This time, I could eat without fear, honoring their memory through simple presence in a place they'd loved. Gregory graduated from California with honors, his success sweeter for being earned on his own terms. His invitation to the ceremony included a note. My fight had given him the chance to finish what he'd started, to prove that freedom and success weren't mutually exclusive despite his parents' beliefs. The final legal proceedings wrapped up with quiet efficiency, restitution ordered, sentences served, protective orders in place. The system had worked, imperfectly but adequately, to address wrongs that could never be fully undone. Justice served cold, but better than none at all. I kept one photo on my desk, my parents at their last birthday dinner, unaware of how little time remained. They looked happy but watchful, protective even in celebration. Their love had been imperfect but real, controlling nothing while trying to shield everything. The difference between them and Roger was choice. They'd prepared for my freedom, even as they'd feared for my safety. Life continued with ordinary complexity. Bad days when trust felt impossible, good days when independence felt like flying, therapy appointments that actually helped, relationships built on honesty rather than manipulation. The gradual construction of a life that belonged fully to me, shaped by trauma but not defined by it. Roger would serve 5 years. Tanya would continue supervised visits indefinitely. Gregory would build his California life. Christine would find her own redemption. Katie would grow up knowing that love meant letting go. And I would honor my parents by living freely, choosing my own path with all its risks and rewards, never again trading autonomy for false security. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. This dude is basically saying, hey, I only committed fraud and kidnapping because I care so much. That's like saying you burned down someone's house to keep them warm. What are you doing, bro? Anyways, that's the end. Thanks for watching. Comment below what you think.